As summer temperatures climb, doctors say kids can overheat faster than adults, especially on playgrounds where there's little shade and hot equipment. Tonight, reporter Cassidy Fury shows us what parents should watch for and how to keep playtime safe.
On days when the heat index climbs, playground time can go from fun to risky fast. Kids don't always recognize when they're overheating, so doctors say it's up to adults to build in breaks, watch for warning signs, and even test the temperature of the equipment before they climb.
Of course, children are more at risk for this problem, though, because frankly they're smaller, and for a lot of different reasons tied to that, they are less likely to be able to maintain their body temperature, and they actually have a higher core body temperature, so they're much more vulnerable to heat illness.
Heat illness can start small, like rashes or cramps, but can quickly move into heat exhaustion and, in rare cases, heat stroke. Pediatrician with WVU Medicine Camden Clark, Dr. Charles Davis, said parents should pay attention to what kids are saying and what they're doing.
The biggest things are when we start to see children that say they feel dizzy or lightheaded, they start to have headaches, they have cramping, nausea can sometimes be one, and then we get to the later stages, then you start to have that true exhaustion where we're no longer sweating, and that's where things can get kind of dangerous.
And it doesn't have to be a record-breaking day. Davis said kids can become overheated in just minutes, especially without regular water breaks and time out of the sun.
It can only take a handful of minutes, and of course it varies with temperature, but I think another misconception is it has to be in extreme heat, and children can be outside playing for several minutes in moderate temperatures and still become exposed to heat illness if not adequately hydrating.
If a child starts feeling sick, he said the first step is to get them out of the heat, then cool them down and hydrate. But the biggest red flag is a change in behavior.
The number one thing is that, just follow the instinct if your child's not acting correctly. If your child's not able to respond to questions, they're not communicating with you directly, that anytime the mental status is altered, we need to seek attention and be able to help correct that.
Davis recommended scheduling outdoor play early in the morning or later in the evening, taking breaks every 15 to 20 minutes in the shade, and checking playground surfaces with the back of your hand. If it's too hot for you to touch for a few seconds, it's too hot for the kids. Reporting from Parkersburg, I'm Cassidy Fury with WTAP News.